Hello everyone. Um Welcome to the mandatory awkward start of the podcast. Um Very happy to actually be sitting down and recording this. This whole idea, this whole channel, it's something that I've been wanting to do for a very, very long time. Probably talking like 6 years at least. Since I first had the idea to start an MMA related YouTube channel. I've had MMA blogs, or MMA blog, I should say, singular. I had that, which never went anywhere, but I've been writing about fights in general for a pretty long time. I'm 25 years old and I've been watching the sport since the Ultimate Fighter UK versus US Bisping Hendo situation. Off the top of my head, I think it was around 2009. So obviously, I've been watching the sport for like a good 14 years, which is kind of mad, to be honest. But yeah, I've been watching the sport for literally most of my life, over half of my life, and for a big portion of that, I've wanted to make a podcast slash YouTube channel slash whatever. So, welcome to the first episode of that. I am assuming that like 4 people will probably listen to this. But if for whatever reason I stick at this and it goes anywhere, I suppose coming back to this podcast, the first episode, it would be pretty cool. So yeah, hello everyone watching in the current time frame, I guess, in 2023. And hello to everyone else that hopefully is coming back to the first episode to see how fucking awkward I am. And hopefully I've gotten much better at this by then. So I was debating whether to make an episode 1 of the podcast being like a hello introduction, like this is my plan sort of thing. But at the end of the day, what I really want to do on this channel is talk about fights. So I decided against that, and I will keep it very brief, but I just want to explain who I am, what this channel is, and my goals with it. And then I will get into my thoughts on the upcoming card this Saturday, which is UFC 292. Sterling versus O'Malley, which is a great card, to be honest. So I do have some notes here in my phone, like a true journalist. So I shouldn't talk too much shit, but there may be some times where I'm waffling a little bit. So please just bear with me, in good time, I will eventually get this whole formula down. This one might be a bit waffly, a bit long, but like I said, not many people are even going to listen to it, so all good. So with the podcast specifically then, the name is potentially a placeholder. I'm not too sure what to call it. I know that obviously the name of my channel is Left Hook Harry. I am Harry, and that isn't going to change, obviously. But as far as the podcast name, I just went with a basic. I'm either going to go with Left Hook Podcast, Left Hook Harry Podcast, LHH podcast, I don't know, some form of that, because I don't want to call the podcast something really cool and people not even be able to find it because they're just typing in, Left Hook Harry Podcast or whatever. So I want to do an episode once a week. Maybe if there's a slow week in MMA, maybe a skip that week. So maybe not every week, but definitely every card is definitely the goal. Obviously, the podcast is just one of many things that I'm trying to do with this channel. Obviously, I've wanted to start a podcast for a very long time. Here is a clip of me from 4 years ago talking about how I'm about to start an MMA podcast. So if you've got me on social media, you'll know that I'm starting a podcast. And it's going to be like MMA slash boxing slash jiu-jitsu slash wrestling. I don't care. I want to learn about all the shit I don't know about. At the minute, I'm fucking, bro, my heart is MMA, man. Like, I don't have time for anything else. I don't practice the sport. I'm not an MMA fighter, but like, my heart is, if I could die for this sport, I would. If there was any way that I you know what I mean? I fucking love this sport, man. So, anyone saying, Oh, fucking podcast, MMA podcast. Who do you think you are? Joe Rogan. Yeah, what? I want to fucking do the podcast, bro. Let me do the podcast. Don't fucking worry about who else does the podcast. And obviously that never happened. 4 years later, here we are. But I am kind of glad because obviously, 4 years is a long time. And in those 4 years, I feel like I've really got into the sport a lot more. From just watching more fights to watching outside of the UFC. 4 years ago, I was a big UFC fan, but I didn't really watch other organizations, and I'm not talking about Bellator and things like that. Obviously, I watched the odd good Bellator card whenever that was. Um, I'm more mean. I'm more talking about ONE FC. The kickboxing, the 4 ounce Muay Thai, the paying a bit more attention to pure grappling and really learning a lot more of the history with ADCC and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm happy that I didn't start it back then. Obviously, if I did start it back then, I would be a lot further on in this whole thing, which would have been great. But you know, as a 21-year-old in 2019, I think I was a bit too distracted by other shit to even commit to a YouTube channel. Whereas now I'm 25, not like that's relevant. I keep mentioning that I'm 25. I'm sorry, I've got some weird fucking issue, and I'm just scared of getting old. So I feel old as fuck is what I'm trying to say. And back then I wasn't old as fuck, and I didn't know as much about the sport as I do now. So that is essentially what I'm trying to say. The waffling is already starting, so I'm going to pick up my phone and now go from the notes. And I do want to mention, obviously, as I said, this podcast is only one part of this channel. The other parts of the channel are just my long form videos. I did a deep dive on Dustin Poirier as my very first video. That is currently the only video that I have on my channel other than this one. So this is my second upload. And I thought that I would take the L, so to speak, and use real fight footage and just, not be able to monetize the video, which is fine because obviously I've only just started this channel. It would be stupid for me to expect any earnings from it. So I thought I'll use real fight footage. I'll get copyrighted, which is fine, and I'll just deal with it. But obviously, if this is a channel that I want to stick at for many years to come and to almost turn into a brand, I do write for the sport as well. I write articles currently at MMA UK. So go over to there and you can type in Left Hook Harry and you can read any of the articles that I've posted on there. So yeah, thank you to all of the guys at MMA UK for allowing me to get my foot in the door with the written content. Obviously, I don't have any aspirations to write for certain companies. Hopefully that kind of happens along the way. I'm going to university next year for sports journalism, and hopefully through that, not only will that sharpen obviously my skills for this stuff, which is truly what I want to do. Obviously writing for the sport is great. I will always write articles. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing the research. It makes me watch more fights, and vice versa. So yeah, MMA UK, Left Hook Harry, read anything that I've written, or most articles on there will just get turned into videos for this channel anyway. So if you're a reader, go and read my articles. If you're much more suited to watch and listen, don't worry about it. Maybe in the future a Patreon may come into play if I do want to do the deep dive videos with fight footage. But again, not expecting to make any money from this at all for like a very long time, to be honest. So I'm not too concerned about that. But just to explain, the scheduling. Do want to cover a little bit of MMA news here and there too, but I don't want to turn into an MMA news channel and be rushing to the laptop when a fighter announces that he's pulling out of a fight or something. I want to try and keep this channel quality over quantity, and obviously that isn't ideal for growth a lot of the time, but I just want to get across very clearly that this is a passion project of mine. I'm still working full time. I make music and I earn sort of income from that too. Like, this is fully, if it turns into a career in the future, perfect. That's what I'm going to uni for, to really get into the media of the sport. But obviously, ideally, I would love to not work for anyone and just make videos for you lot, and not be able to not have to work full time. But again, that's far in the future. Anyway, I will for real stop waffling now. I have my phone in my hand, and yes, UFC 292. Great card, to be honest. Has lost a few fights, so it isn't as great as it was going to be. But still, the replacement fights, like for example with Mario Batista, was going to fight Garbrandt, and Garbrandt obviously pulled out, and now he's fighting Blackshear, who literally just fought. So he's doing like a Hamzat Shemaev double booking thing. I think he literally fought on like the last card, or maybe the one before that. He fought in like the last few weeks anyway. So he's coming back in. Obviously not ideal for him, but if he pulls it off, it just adds a little layer to the fight that wouldn't have been there. Obviously, I would have preferred to see Cody Garbrandt in there with Batista, but Bautista, I should say. Every time I say Batista, I just picture David. But overall, the card looks good. I'm not going to cover every single fight on the card. I'm just going to touch over the big ones and the two Ultimate Fighter finale fights, because, and please don't crucify me when I say this, but I actually have been kind of enjoying Tough 31. I know that a lot of people may want to throw rotten fruit at me for that, but it's been a decent season. What do you want me to say? I enjoyed the fights. There wasn't a lot of fights. I kind of miss the old formula that they used to use. You used to hear a lot more from Dana. You used to hear a lot more from everyone, to be honest. This season's been kind of weird. It's been like 70% look at this fighter, FaceTime their family and cry. It's been 20% that was a pretty good fight, and then it's been 10% of classic McGregor moments, like him telling a fighter that if he has pain to grab it out of his body and throw it. And then he said something about throw it into the ocean because there's plenty more fish in the sea. I'm not sure, to be honest. He looked like a swollen doorstop on the first episode, and towards the end of the season, he was looking a lot more like himself, which is great if you're a McGregor fan, which I'm not these days as far as outside of the cage, but I will admit there's nothing like a McGregor fight week. Everybody gets views, everybody's in good spirits, it brings everybody. I get asked at work by random people, oh, that Connor's fighting again, and that Colin McGregor's fighting again, as my mum always calls him, good old Colin McGregor, the notorious one. But either way, decent season. Obviously nothing on the seasons that have been and gone. I'm not saying it compares to any of the great seasons. It doesn't even really compare to McGregor Faber, and Conor was hardly in that, but it was that season. You got some good fights, especially in that first couple of episodes. It was just full of fights back then. But yeah, I don't know. Tough finale fights. You've got Brad Katona and Cody Gibson. Now, it is currently Thursday, 10 p.m., and the Ultimate Fighter finale is about to air, as in the last episode of the season. And obviously, in my current time zone, I'm not supposed to know who wins this, because obviously it's about to air, and Cody Gibson is fighting Connor's guy, Rico, I want to say his name is. I forgot his name, to be honest. I know he's got like an Italian name. But them two are fighting, and I'm obviously not supposed to know who wins, but obviously I saw who won when the card got announced earlier in this week, so I haven't actually seen the fight, as in Cody's last fight that caused him to be in the finals, so I can't really predict accurately because I'm going to go watch it after I finish this podcast. But obviously I know Cody wins. I would have picked Cody anyway. Obviously Rico, Connor's guy, got a knockout, and the big double axe fucking hammer fist was great. But Cody is a bit more well-rounded. more experienced, like all of the vets are, of course. Brad Katona seems like the type of guy that would slit your throat in your sleep. Can't really explain what I mean by that, but he just looks a bit dodgy, mate, to be honest. Great guy, I'm sure. Has a beautiful family back home, but there's just something about him, like he would genuinely like if you see a news article, MMA fighter is taking bath salts and eating his roommate. I feel like a picture of Brad Katona is probably going to be on that article. But nevertheless, Cody Gibson and Brad had a weird little. Again, I haven't seen this yet. This is in tonight's episode, but I saw the clip on Twitter, of course. They had a little argument, and it seemed like Cody was saying, "You're a boring fighter, Brad. All you do is just wrestle against the fence, and you're just a grappler, and you're just boring." Which is pretty funny because Cody's grapples a lot as well. Cage wrestling and whatnot. I feel like he was just saying that to Brad. He might as well have said, "Hey, Brad, when we fight in the finals, can you not grapple me, please, mate? Because I think you'll probably win." And I did like Cody. Cody was kind of like my favorite throughout the season, but he kind of ruined it with that. You're the most self-centered person I've ever met in 35 years of life. Like, bro, relax. Like, I know I get the tensions are a bit high in the tough house and stuff, but it seems like Brad just eats his prepped meal and sits and stares at the wall until it's time to weigh in. I don't know what he could have done to trigger Cody that bad, to be honest. But either way, Cody Gibson, Brad Katona. This isn't a predictions video, but I might as well predict. I've got Brad by very annoying, boring performance. He also obviously shouldn't even be in the final, in my opinion. He got gifted that decision against Timo, but it is what it is. Kurt Hollabor, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm not American, so it sounds a bit weird. Austin Hubbard, two decent fighters. Kurt definitely looks better on The Ultimate Fighter than he did in his UFC run, although he did kind of have like very tough competition in hindsight, so obviously you can only judge that much with something like that, because some of the guys he lost to are still winning today, so nothing to drop your head in shame about, Kurt, if you are listening, mate. Austin Hubbard, good fighter, obviously. Both of them are pretty good. I think Austin Hubbard's kind of a little bit more advanced as far as he's a bit more of a modern MMA fighter. He's a bit more well-rounded. Kurt is like a Forrest Griffin clone. Like, I don't know, he just gives me those old school MMA fighter vibes. Like, the Monster Energy, Monster Truck, fucking, all that shit. He kind of gives me those vibes. Although, I mean, his boxing against Jason Knight was beautiful. They were both fighting on the same team in The Ultimate Fighter, so the coaches weren't allowed to really speak. So it was like a Gaethje Ferguson thing. Like, every time he hit Jason, it just sounded disgusting. Every shot was just very heavy, and I don't know. Kurt just looked very good, to be honest. But obviously, it's Jason Knight. But I say obviously it's Jason Knight. He finished Jason Knight, and nobody does that. So I say nobody does that. A few people have done that, but you understand my point. I've ultimately got Austin. Like I said, I think he's just a bit more modern. He's a bit more well-rounded. He uses the newer techniques. He's adapted to the new way of MMA a little bit more than Kurt, I think. And obviously, both guys have been in the UFC before. But I just think Austin might be just a little bit too much, a little bit too technical. It might be a bit of a boring fight. Although I can't lie, I would kind of prefer Kurt to win. Nothing against Austin. He's a great guy. From the outside it seems anyway. But Kurt is just, he's one for us. He's one for the OG fans. He's one. He's a throwback fighter. So yeah, come on, Kurt Holloway. Let's bring it home. Well, I'm British, but you understand. Next, we've got Chris Weidman, Brad Tavares. Obviously, they've kind of gave Chris a fight to come back to that he doesn't really have a high risk of getting KO'd in the first 30 seconds. His chin isn't like terrible, Chris. This is, but he's been out for like over 2 years. He's just snapped his leg. I know he said that he's going to come back and throw like a super hard leg kick. And if he does that, I think I will throw up on my carpet. But I don't think he will do that. I think he's going to feel a bit weird. He's going to be a bit hesitant. Brad Tavares isn't really finishing anyone, but I've heard a few people say they've got a weird gut feeling that he's going to KO Chris early, and I can't really disagree. Chris could definitely take him down. I mean, Brad Tavares has very good takedown defense. I don't know. Eventually, I think that Chris could win a decision here. He is a big guy, and obviously, if he's been training for any part, even half of the last 2 years, it's still a year in the gym. Of course, he's old, so there's not really much else he can learn and add to his game at this point. But I just don't want to write him off completely. I'm a big Weidman fan. If you look at the guy's resume, some of the people he's beat, it's just crazy, and I don't want to see him go outside. We saw Robbie Lawler get a lovely first round KO and ride off into the sunset. Let's see a nice Weidman submission, second round. He gets Brad down. He's a bit gassed, but fuck it. Come on. Please, Weidman, don't get KO'd. Although I do see him getting finished, unfortunately. But I don't think he'll retire, honestly. I think Chris is a very smart guy. I'm not saying that he's not. He's a very intelligent person. But I kind of feel like he's the type of guy to hang around a little bit too long. Maybe not to BJ Penn standard, but maybe lose like 5 or 6 in a row, 7 in a row, maybe, and then Dana kind of have to say, listen, you need to leave because you are losing to people outside the top 15. I mean, it goes without saying most of the top 15 probably beat Weidman. I mean, I say that, but no one can fucking wrestle in middleweight, so maybe not, Come on, Chris. Bring it home. I say bring it home again for another American. Please forgive me, you know what I mean? Very smart guy. If you lose, hang him up, bro. There's other things you can do. Please, don't get knocked out. Marlon Vera versus Pedro Munoz. This is a difficult one. Obviously, Cheeto's coming off a loss. His style's very low output, big shots. Like, yeah, I might stand in front of you and not really do anything for 2 minutes, but then I'll land a head kick that rocks you, so I'll steal the round type deal. Munoz has a very good chin, I will say. But if anyone's going to flatline him, it probably is Marlon Vera. In his last fight, he did get just kind of, shown levels by Corey in the grappling. But Marlon Vera's no slouch on the mat, although the last fight does kind of allude to that. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think Pedro Munoz will grapple and submit him, although Pedro Munoz is also a great grappler in his own right, especially jiu-jitsu wise. So maybe it ends up on the mat. Maybe you see a crazy scrambling, Munoz sinks in a sub. But I think if it stays on the feet, Marlon Vera might get it. He kind of needs to come out different for this one. In the Sean O'Malley fight, Pedro Munoz and Sean O'Malley, that is, Pedro kind of fought on the outside. It was a little bit weird to see, being the fact that he had such a he's such a shorter man to Sean, and he kind of fought on the outside through leg kicks. I think if he fights like that against Cheeto, he's probably going to get caught with something big at some point, right? Whether it finishes him or not, is to be seen. But I think he will catch him, and I don't know if he will survive 1 or 2 big shots from Cheeto. I do want Cheeto to change his style, in the sense that I want him to start a bit faster. Everybody wants him to start a bit faster. He is a very, very, very slow starter, man. Like, you've got people like Cowboy Cerrone and Piotr Yan who are slow starters, but Cheeto is a slow starter, man. That Dominic Cruz fight, I think I had Dominic like 3-1 up or something. I forget. He got finished in the 4th or the 5th. I'm not too sure, but I had Dominic Cruz winning that fight. And then Cheeto obviously KOs him. That's Dom Cruz. I fucking love Dom Cruz. He's the face of this channel. He's the man in my profile picture. This fight actually is where my profile picture is from. The Cheeto Cruz fight. But my point being that if anybody's going to KO Pedro Munoz, who is probably 3, 4, 5 losses away from being done anyway, done is in retiring, I think Cheeto can do it. You know, he's still young. He's still adding things to his game. He's a fan favorite. He knows what's at stake here if he wins, and even if Sean loses, they'll probably do that fight. He gets a chance to beat O'Malley properly this time, and you know that's everything at this point. If O'Malley goes on a 2-fight losing skid, and he loses to Sterling and loses to Cheeto, that isn't looking good. Next, you've got Neil Magny versus Ian Gary. Obviously, Machado Gary, I should say. But I'll just call him Ian Gary for convenience. Ian Gary was supposed to be fighting Jeff Neal, which is a matchup I was kind of scared about, to be honest, because I do kind of think Jeff is a little bit too powerful. Obviously, we've seen Gary get dropped a couple of times. One of them was really bad. I thought he was out when he got dropped by that left hook. I forget who dropped him. I could probably just Google it and find out, but I can't be asked. Magny's obviously a very good gatekeeper in the sense that, you know, if you're not good enough, he'll find you out. But if you're good enough to beat him, you're probably good enough to make a run at the belt. So, you know, no shame in losing to Neil Magny, but you do kind of want to be winning these kind of fights if you're Ian Gary, you know. He's gotten a lot of promo in the last few months, just little clips, you know. Whoever's behind his marketing is doing a great job with the clip with Chris Curtis in sparring, and then you've got the whole thing where he was talking to Buckley, and he was saying, I don't give a fuck if you're a name, I don't give a fuck, I'm fighting up the rankings, mate, what are you doing? All that shit. That was a fucking awful accent. I promise I've got a better one in me than that, but I'll leave it in because, like I said, 13 people listening to this episode in total. Ian Gary, of course, clean, sniper, technical, likes to keep it at range, likes to throw the straight right hand down the pipe, the head kicks, you know, crisp striker. That was difficult. Neil Magny, not so much, you know, likes to make it a bit more of a fight, so to speak. I hate that phrase, you know, he likes to make it a fight, but you know what I mean. He likes to grab you if he gets close enough. He likes to kind of do a lot of weird shit, gets his head off the center line, you know, kind of similar to Aljamain Sterling, to be honest. Not in style, but just in the kind of weird stuff he does that will catch some of these prospects out, you know. If they think they're just going to finish Neil Magny quickly, like if Gary thinks he's just going to head kick him like he did D-Rod, he's probably got another thing coming. But that head kick against D-Rod is important because D-Rod's pretty tough, man. Like, you know, he's a fucking big guy. And for Gary to KO him like that with a head kick so fast as well and call the shot, you know, it shows this guy's good. Obviously, everybody loves when Gary's on, he's on, you know, beautiful boxing against the cage. He's long, he's rangy, he's just an overall joy to watch as far as on the feet goes. But his defense does leave a little to be desired, you know. He's, like I said, he's been caught pretty hard. His first 2 UFC fights were not great. I mean, he got the win, but you know, he was getting tagged. He's been dropped a few times already, and he's only like a few fights into his career, you know. So, but he did KO D-Rod, which is a great achievement. You know, I'm not taking anything away from the kid, and I'm a big Ian Gary fan. I hope he does very well in the future. I'm just a bit worried. I was very worried against Jeff Neal. I'm not so much worried against Neil Magny, but I think if they do rebook that Jeff Neal fight, or if he fights one of these big punchers, I am very worried for him, to be honest. Co-main event, Wei versus Lemos. How do I put this? Lemos hits like a bloke. She hits harder than some blokes, to be honest. I thought in my head that she was like a short, I mean, they are both short, you know, they're both 5'4", but I pictured it as like, Lemos was kind of like a short Jessica Andrade kind of esque stance, you know, overhand right from like a tucked in tight short guard, but she's the same height as Weili, which surprised me, to be honest. So I can't really talk about, as far as height and reach, they're pretty even. Where they're not even, of course, is just in high level experience in Weili's case. Obviously, she's fought the best fighters in the weight class. She's held the belt, lost it, held the belt. You know, she's fought the who's who. Lemos does punch really hard, she definitely has the power advantage, and in fact, she's kind of one of the only women in that whole division um, that punches like she does. Obviously, you've got Nunes, who's just retired. There's just some of these women, it's not even how they throw or anything like that, it's just the reaction that they get and the sound these shots make. And Lemos, is one of those women. She cracks like a fucking a good light heavyweight. You know what I mean? Obviously, Whaley got finished by Rose very quick, so it's not like anyone can say, you know, a Lemos first round KO isn't on the cards. It is very live. If you're a betting man, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Whaley is strong enough to kind of use the game plan of wrestling and holding her down. Although I think that if that isn't the case, I mean, I remember with the Esparza fight, there was a lot of talks about can Whaley stuff the takedowns, how's her wrestling and stuff like that. And, she looked great. So I do think she can out grapple Lemos. I do think she can hold her down if she chooses to. And I think maybe it's one of those performances where she kind of pins her. And then as soon as Lemos starts trying to post, maybe gives up her back or something, I don't think Whaley's necessarily going to sink a choke in. I think she'll maybe go for the ground and pound finish instead. And that's kind of what I see. I kind of see Whaley wrestling, maybe 2-3 rounds in, and then just kind of Lemos gassing out and just lying down, covering up, and taking the O. There are multiple people that have broke this fight down in much more detail than I will or have for any of these fights. Obviously, you got people like Jack Slack, the Heavy Hands boys. The Heavy Hands actually spoke about this fight for a pretty lengthy amount of time. So if you do want an in-depth breakdown of that fight, the co-main event, obviously go and check those guys out. This isn't the place for it. I've been waffling for a very long time, and I don't want this podcast to be an hour and a half long for the first episode. Main event then, UFC 292, obviously headlined by Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley, and again, not going to break this one down crazily, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about this fight because I feel like a lot of people wasn't giving Aljamain his credit, and I was always the person in the room with my friends when watching the cards when he was going up against TJ. I know obviously TJ came in injured, but I had Aljo for that fight. The second PLT Yam fight I had Aljo for. I do rate Aljo very highly. Not the most entertaining fighter in the fights that he grinds out, as in like the early fights of his career when he was doing a lot of the shooting for a low single and laying on his knees and all that shit. And he still does that now, to be fair. But Aljo is a pretty violent fighter. I wouldn't almost say violent person. That was a bit personal. Very violent fighter in his own right, can definitely make it bloody. The Cejudo fight was pretty good, pretty active, good output. Aljo does a lot of weird shit where he'll like duck down and kind of like reach his arm up and throw a shot and then weave a certain way and throw a shot with the other hand as he's exiting the pocket and then try and shoot in, and he's always like crouching and like swinging his head around. It's like Fight Night Champion if you just held LT and just spun the analog round. He does a lot of weird shit like that as he's closing the distance, but that's obviously got him into trouble with Marlon Moraes. It got him flatlined. He tried to come in and caught the knee of a head kick, and obviously that could happen with Sean O'Malley. He has a good high kick. We've seen his high kick a few times. It's definitely good enough to knock Aljamain out. But I don't think, obviously it's fighting, so it doesn't matter what I think, but my opinion is that Aljo has probably learned from that lesson, although Sean is just as good from Southpaw as he is Orthodox. So it's a dangerous game, playing the game that Aljo does as far as his head movement. It's so erratic, but it gets him off the center line ultimately, and that's the goal when you fight in a long, rangy, straight puncher like O'Malley is. Obviously, goes without saying, Aljo does like to start fast. He's a pressure fighter, essentially. The weird things he does lends itself to the pressure because he's kind of coming at you in a certain weird angle that these fighters kind of freeze for a second, and then before they know it, that he's in on a low single, or you're against the cage or whatever it is. But O'Malley is good on the back foot. He's good at not letting himself just get back straight up to the fence. He's got good feints to get him out of the pocket if he wants to get out. But obviously, he hasn't fought somebody on the level of Aljamain as far as the wrestling. And I think ultimately it will be a little bit too much. The straight shots are great. Obviously, as I said, Aljo does have good defense on the feet, getting his head off the center line and shooting in from weird angles. So the straight shots might not be as effective as Sean O'Malley might be hoping they are. But I do ultimately see him landing one or two, and kind of having those moments where he grazes Aljo and everybody on the commentary desk is screaming like, "Oh, he landed, But I think Aljo gasses him out, to be honest. Not saying O'Malley has a bad gas tank. From what we've seen, it's actually pretty good. Same with his chin, is pretty good. So as far as that kind of stuff, all the boxes are ticked. But I do see, Aljo eventually getting the sub or getting the TKO in the second or third round. O'Malley kind of slowing down after fighting off these awkward shots and clinch attempts. Sean O'Malley does the whole Ryan Hall thing, Corey Sandhagen thing of like giving up his back and posting, standing up, fighting grips and fighting the hands rather than just not giving you back at all, which is what most people would probably advise you to do. So O'Malley does a lot of that stuff, turns on his knees, posts off the fence or off of the mat, and that's a whole nother thing. The fence, O'Malley's cage grabs are definitely going to be active in this fight. So look out for that. O'Malley can't really utilize his spins like he usually does. He does like to feint the spin, and I've got this weird visual in my head of him spinning, throwing a kick, it kind of almost catching Aljo kind of thinking, "I dare you to throw that again, I'm going to take you back in a second." And then O'Malley throws a few shots, circles, fakes the spin again, Aljo goes to shoot and he throws a knee up the middle. Whether it lands or not, whether it does anything, whether Aljo just head on the outside and takes him straight down, or whether it hits Aljo on the chin and KOs him, I don't know. But I can see him using that fake spin to set up the knees up the middle. Obviously, he hurt Piotr Jan with a knee up the middle. Very, very live for a knee KO from O'Malley too. But obviously, that is dream world stuff, in my opinion. Not everybody can be Leon Edwards. Not everybody can throw a Hail Mary and KO the fucking whatever on the last second. I'm not saying Aljamain is Kamaru Usman, but he's very effective, and I can't see many people in the division other than Marab, who he just won't fight, beating him, to be honest. So Sean fights the grips and posts, and like I said, and I think ultimately Aljo will take his back, get the back sitting position, body triangle, kind of waste a bit of the round. Sean scrambling, looking at the camera, doing all the stuff of like, well, what the fuck, like looking at the camera and kind of saying like, what's he doing? This isn't fighting, that whole fucking attitude. And I think he'll either, while he's taunting or while he's sticking a thumb up or while he's doing whatever he's doing, Aljo probably sinks in a choke. He fights the hands, breaks the grip, and then Aljo sinks it in even deeper and subs him. Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira-esque. Or I can see Aljo just kind of pinning him down to the mat, Sean scrambling, getting to the cage, wall walking, getting tripped again, few more shots, trying to stand back up, few more shots, getting tripped again, loses a round, goes out, deals with it again for another round. Third round, maybe lands a good shot or lands a good front kick that seems to back Aljo up, gets a bit confident, and then immediately just adrenaline dumps as Aljo gets him down again, and then Aljo just pounds him out. Pause is what I can see personally. So Aljamain third round TKO. If Sean lasts that long, if the gas tank isn't there from Sean, maybe a second round TKO. Or Sean O'Malley KO, which is the preferred method from me personally, as somebody that quite enjoys Sean O'Malley. Not a big fan of the Nelk Boys side of his personality, but as far as what I see of him in interviews, he seems like a pretty humble guy. So yeah, rooting for Sean O'Malley. My heart says Aljamain. Heart says Sean O'Malley. Head says Aljamain Sterling. So yeah, first episode of the podcast done. Thank you very much. If anybody is still listening, please drop a comment just so I know that somebody has actually took their time to listen to this. Obviously, really appreciate it. I'll be back in podcast form probably next week or just at some point after the card to do kind of like a post thoughts, breakdown thing. Deep dive on Justin Gaethje is coming next week also. Will probably be out before the podcast is, so if you watch that, I hope you enjoy it. Go watch the Dustin Poirier podcast, Dustin Poirier deep dive, and let me know what you think there too. Twitter, Instagram, all of that is in the description. It's just Left Hook Harry, and then on Instagram it's Left Hook Harry MMA. If you do want to email in for whatever reason, lefthookharrymma@gmail.com. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate you being here, and I hope that I'm doing this for many decades to come. Cheers.